Also, everyone, Logan with 5051 national team, predominantly, like Brian said, also, like to organize with the veterans whenever I can. Super, super happy to be here. Yeah, OIF, OEF veteran. That's my generation of vets. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. GWAT is in the house. All right,
Mm.
moving on. We're going to talk to Mr. John Moses. John Moses is a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. John, you tell us about yourself.
Sergeant First Class retired John Moses of Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Retired from the Army in 2019, had a couple of tours. I like to say that I'm kind of good looking and somewhat funny, and it is a pleasure to be here to talk about the issues of the day. And now I have glasses to go along with it. These are not, by the way, meta glasses. I am not recording your faces. Cheers.
All right. And now we want to talk to Noah. He is our fourth panelist. Noah, introduce yourself.
Yeah, Noah joined the Army, would not join the Army again. Most of my organizing is veteran focused, so I work primarily on peace and about face.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so I got a few questions here, and we're just going to go through and we're going to ask them and we're going to talk about them. I think what we're going to do, we got a relatively small crowd today. We're just going to keep it relatively loose and let the panelists just kind of talk out what they're thinking about things and keep it relatively open. I don't think we have to get too formal here. And then we'll open it up for questions if people want to talk about what we're doing or why we're doing it or whatever. And we're just here to answer your questions and try to help you understand, the overlap between activism and service. So the first question is, um, I just want to get everybody's temperature. Like, what's your kind of opinion on the current actions of the U.S. military? And are they at odds with what the 5051 movement is trying to do? All right, I'm gonna volunteer Logan to get us started.
Only because he knows I like to talk a lot. Um, Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, speaking from at least the 5051 perspective, I can clearly say that, the actions currently going on with the United States military are 1000% against 5051 values, right? I mean, let's be honest here with what we're looking at, first and foremost. We are once again in a war in the Middle East. The president said, campaigned on this idea of no more forever wars. Can't really articulate why we're there in Iran. The administration can't. They can't give out clear reasoning or goals of this must occur in order for us to stop. And now, even when they try to buy out, the Iranian government to sue for peace with umpteen billions, however much it was in that deal, they still won't take it because they know they hold the cards, right? Um, I think that not only is this, anathema from 5051 values, but it's against, like it's against what we should be doing as Americans, full stop, whatever that means to anyone. Um, the only reason I can think of that we're there right now is to distract from the fact that the president of the United States is in the Epstein files, right? And because Israel told us to be there, right? And I think that that's the long and the short of it. Other than that, I don't think there's any other reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, and that's why we're doing this. A lot of us kind of predicted that we were going to be involved in some kind of altercation or catastrophe, and here we are. So, John, what do you think about that? I know you have some thoughts on this.
I do have some thoughts on this, and I think I'd like to start by saying that there are 17 American lives that have been lost since this 2-week war has started. Um, and I think it's really important to recognize that those Americans that have died without an explanation. They have died without a national purpose. They have died far away from home, probably young and scared. Almost all of them lieutenants, young sergeants, privates. So these people joined for a lot of different reasons, but it was not to die in some, HESCO barrier in the Middle East for
And
war
for
that we
what?
can't account for,
For what?
right? For what? And so I think for me, I was driving around today and just this thought popped in my mind about post 9/11 that I had already joined the army in 1996 and then 9/11 occurred and the entire country in lockstep said, this is what we have to do. And we all lost friends in the Middle East and in Afghanistan in the general war on terror. But we all understood that the basis of it, whether it was some of it was bullshit or a lot of it was bullshit, the main preface for us going to war as a country was because we were going to protect the homeland and we were going to do the work that was required. And my thoughts on this war are it's a diversion. It's been pushed on a president that is not healthy and takes influence from the outside. And his son-in-law and his chief negotiator are making billions and billions of dollars while they negotiate with, of all people, Persians. Because as somebody that was in Afghanistan negotiating directly with the Afghan people and the Persian subculture there, um, good luck. Good luck negotiating it with anybody from this background because, like Logan said, they have all the cards. They're going to continue to cause deaths. They're going to continue to take out radar stations. They're going to continue to knock out shipping. And it's just become now a long slog that will be part of this country's shamed history for starting wars for no reason. That's my thoughts.
Well
Yeah,
said.
and I want to think the corruption stuff is something that we haven't talked about a lot, but it has a little bit of Marie Antoinette vibes, a little bit, where they're taking all our money and they're sending us off to wars and they're destroying our economy, and we're not going to have anything to show for it because it's all about him. Again, and that is why we do this. Um, so, Noah, I'd like to get your thoughts, but I'd also like you to just talk a little bit about about Face's perspective because you represent another organization that's been very prominent in the fight against this regime.
Yeah, so from the perspective of kind of an anti-war organizer, there is no such thing as a good war. And this is another example of us sending, right, I'm in my mid 30s, so many people my age and much younger, but sending our children, it's kind of the traditional quote, to die and fight in another rich man's war. Iran feels very similar to Iraq in that it's kind of built on this nice little shelf of lies I think about Face because we originally started as Iraq Veterans Against the War feels particularly activated by this kind of ongoing insistence that we must be the world's neighbor, and being a good neighbor requires engaging once again with the Middle East. I think we see the same thing, and we're also seeing shadows of this here at home. In every conflict that we are in. And I would argue, as someone who did not serve out of very patriotic reasons whatsoever, that the most anyone is dying for a paycheck that we are all entitled to by virtue of being young and wishing to serve the country.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Okay, so that's actually a perfect segue because the next we're going to be talking a little bit about patriotism. And so I really want to encourage the panelists to just, be loose and talk loosely, don't wait for my prompting. So we'll start with Noah just because Noah was talking about patriotism. What's patriotism mean to you?
Not much. I think it's a cheap currency for which we can exchange things like bravery and conceits like courage, when in fact that they often just house corruption. I think it is fair and well to be proud of where one is from. And I also think that American exceptionalism makes it very difficult for at least me personally to be proud of where I am from. So I believe that at this time, patriotism is doing the right thing, regardless of the reward and whether or not it is easy or difficult, whether or not anyone sees it or not. And within that definition, things like this, right? This is actual service. This is what patriotism should feel like, is defending not necessarily your country as a whole, but your neighbor.
That was a good one.
Right. Like
Yeah.
all the people standing up to ICE around the country are patriots. That's patriotism.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. That service looks a lot like good neighbors just being good neighbors.
Yeah.
I think you nailed that, right? And I think patriotism, whether we like it or not, is intensely personal because there are people that have been calling me names now, like you're a communist and this and that, despite my service and retirement. And right, I think it is an intensely personal decision. I do agree, though, for me, patriotism, for me and a lot of people here, is about protecting the least among us, right? The citizen that gets arrested by ICE, who by default defends all of those immigrants. That's why we have rights as citizens. But that is a good point, and I definitely think that patriotism, it can be very individual, and it can also be very toxic, which is a lot of what we're seeing now.
Yeah, it's sort of like the difference between like patriotism and nationalism. At least that's how I see it. I consider myself a patriot, and I've always been a patriot, and that's actually why I joined the movement is out of a sense of patriotism and duty, because I felt like that my country was in need, and I can't imagine I'm the only one. And I've met a lot of people who do feel the same way. So we do take our oaths pretty seriously, the movement veterans especially. So Logan, you got any thoughts on patriotism?
Yeah, I think I'm probably most similarly aligned to Noah here. I Yeah, I mean, look, man, I mean, when I think about patriotism, it is most certainly like Moses said, it's very personal what it can look like. I do think it gets bandied around, especially here in the United States of America, as either some way to whitewash a shitty policy. You are not a patriot unless you agree with the law, right? And that can be a bad war, it can be targeting immigrants, it can be targeting our black and brown brothers and sisters and siblings and neighbors. It can come in the guise of anything. It can also be used to, I mean, capitalism, right? To sell, hot dogs on, the 4th of July and Memorial Day, right? Let's go ahead and wrap things in flags and sell it to the American public. Um, for me, when I think of what true patriotism is, it's if I want this country to be great, right? Or if I at least want it to progress in the direction that I feel is best, that means that I must hold the administration accountable and that it is our duty to speak up against injustices, right? Whether they're happening here at home or abroad in the name of our country. Very similar to, I think, what some others have mentioned. I joined because I was from a certain socioeconomic class. Yes, most certainly being a service was part of it, but also so was getting a college education paid for, right? Because this is what I observed in my youth and my family. This is how you go to college, right? So for me, it's most certainly complicated. Look, I love my country, more than anything else. I will do anything and everything in my power to make sure that, those that are my neighbors that are in this area, that are, fellow Americans, and immigrants, frankly, I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that they're protected and that we live in a country that I'm proud to live in, that I'm also okay with my kids to grow up in, right? And that can be very much at odds, I think, with what most people think patriotism is.
That is true, but I think this movement is working to change that, to make patriotism into something else where it doesn't have to be this kind of gross nationalistic, American flag on everything on the back of your pickup truck. It's like, no, patriotism should be quiet, right? It should be strength. It should be, a love of country and a love of family and friends and community and, where you come from, at least that's how I think of it. I think of it as a set of ideals.
May I interject real quick? I
Yes.
remember very distinctly one time somebody, calling me a name for going out and protesting and speaking and really questioning my patriotism. And in their profile photo, they were wearing American flag boxer shorts. And I was like, so you're telling me, and I don't know how appropriate or inappropriate this could get, that me speaking out against the overreach of the federal government, stepping over the Fourth Amendment, arresting people en masse and sticking them into holding centers without enough doctors makes me not a patriot, but you can rub the flag on your taint. Got it. Got it.
That's going live, sir.
Oh, thank God.
Make sure we clip that. Make sure
Yeah,
you get the
yeah.
minutes.
All right. Yeah, no, agreed, and all good points. So Logan, I want to transition a little bit because you were talking about the social class bit. I do know just from my own reading that something that we did in the United States after the Second World War is we decided to use service as sort of like a social program where you join service and it's like sort of like an earned entitlement effectively because you get the GI Bill and these other things. And it was actually one of the smartest things this country ever did was that program. Um, so I probably want to go around the room then and get a sense of like why everybody even joined the service in the first place. Because it seems like we don't have that. We have a patriotic instinct here, but we don't have a nationalistic one where people wanted to go join the army and go kill bad guys. Like that isn't what anybody was doing. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about that. And since Logan opened the floor on it, why don't we get Logan's answer first?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a military brat that joined the military, right? So it's something I was surrounded by. I grew up in England, right? Lived a good chunk of my life in Europe. Um, so for me, it was the environment I was in. Before that, I lived in abject poverty. So I saw what happened, right? If you work for the military, you can pull yourself out of poverty, right? For me, like I knew I wanted to pay for college, but also it was something that, I at least in an abstract manner believed in, right? Didn't necessarily think it was bad. Didn't agree necessarily with the Iraq war, but it wasn't big enough for me not to join. I'll tell you that. Um, so yeah, I mean, for me, it was, socioeconomic reasons. I also think that there was, a sense of duty and service there to an extent. Most folks in my family, at least in my dad's side of the family, at least one dude in that generation always joins the military, it seems like, going back before the inception of this country. So that's always just been there, right? We've always had that in my family. Like we've fought in literally every single American conflict from the inception of this country. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was always kind of destined to happen. And it was a good thing for a wayward young man to do if they wanted to go to college. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the reason that I joined was specifically for college money. And actually, when I was younger, I wasn't a patriot. My patriotism really kind of kicked in when Donald Trump was elected because I'm like, oh, we can use this flag, which we haven't been using to fight this. And a whole bunch of people kind of figured that out at the same time. And that's part of what spawned 5051 was that observation. So John, I know you got some thoughts on patriotism, or I'm sorry, on why you joined the service.
Yeah. So, I'll give you two stories real quick, and then I'll tell you why I joined because it has nothing to do with either of them. But the Moses family on my side are what now nationalists call, heritage Americans. So my family were signers of the association tests in New Hampshire, which was essentially polling the towns to see if they wanted to sign the Declaration of Independence, which they did. The other half of my family is not a heritage family. I have about 154 relatives that I know of that came through Canada and the Quebec area. So complete immigrant family, French, French Canadian. When I was 17 and I signed a month after I turned 17, I didn't know either of those things. So I don't take any credit for those. But it's just interesting where people come from. People had served in my direct line on both sides. But for me, when I joined, I just didn't have a lot of options. And I remember a recruiter walked in, an army recruiter with their dress greens at the time. And I remember all the girls in high school, heads turned and were like, whoa. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And that was about as deep as my plan got for joining the army. I was like, girls like it, you get respect, people are like into that. Again, this is 1996, right? Way before 9/11. So I'd love to say that there was some patriotic urge to it, but I really just joined to fit in. And then as I joined, I learned a lot about what it meant to be in the Army. And my experience seems to be a little bit different than yours, Noah. It took me 23 years to figure it out. So I'm glad you got it early. But yeah, that was it. And then it ended up giving me some great benefits. But at the same time, my motivation was a young motivation. People join the military when they're young and they want to have a steady paycheck, you know, dental care. But I wanted people's heads to turn when I walked by, which, by the way, to be fair, never really happened because I didn't have anything on the uniform. So that's why I joined.
And Noah, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was very, very simple. I got into the college of my dreams. I said, "Oh my goodness, middle class parents, how am I going to college?" They said, "What is in your checking account?" I said, "About $400." They said, "That's what you can go to college with." I walked into a recruiter's office literally a week later. Army was the first door on the left. Would have been the Marines if I went a little further to my right.
Yeah, so
And see,
that's 4 out of 4 joining the service because they needed money. So
that's the thing about this country, though, right? Is they take advantage of the fact that they've built an economy that nobody has any money, college is unaffordable, and they're like, oh shit, we need to go invade Southeast Asia, or we have to go bomb Iran. And people are vulnerable at that age. Their thought process isn't really developed. And so money, pride, they go after all of the things that young men and women care about before they join. And that's the system we've built at this point. We've been at war continuously nearly for what, since World War II? And there is always people that they can recruit, and they're almost always disadvantaged in some way.
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, all good points. Um, we're gonna take a different tack here. So all of us here, most of us, I imagine here, including those who are not on the panel, are members of some organization or involved in the movement in some way. And so I'd just like to get a temperature take on like why people have joined the organizations that they have. We'll probably start with John. So John is a ambassador with Massachusetts 5051. So he works with me. We do outreach and we make friends and that kind of thing. That's kind of what we do. And I want him to just talk about his experience and like why he decided to do it. I'd also like to hear about some of the things he's done with Mass Afghan, which many of you may not know, but it's an interesting story and worth telling on its own right.
Absolutely. So great question. So I work with Mass 5051. I can never get that. I can never nail that. Mass 5051 and the 5051 veterans. Why I joined, a lot of it was witnessing other brave people. So Mass 5051 isn't all veterans, and I remember being just very taken aback and impressed with people willing to speak out at their own risk. That for me is the sign of a sign of patriotism. If you're willing to speak out on behalf of others, and give others opportunity to do so, that is a real mark of patriotism. So I've been able to go out and speak publicly. I wear my uniform jacket with now I have all the stuff on it. And the reason I wear the jacket is I tried it once, and I remember thinking back to Vietnam veterans when I did it. But when we went out and spoke, my neighbors came out, and this is very early in the administration when the events were small, there wasn't a lot of people there. People were afraid, and they were like, "I feel less afraid because you're wearing that jacket." And I was like, "Well, shit, I'm just going to wear this jacket all the time now." And it's a real in-your-face thing, and it is very hard to question somebody's patriotism when you got a stack of medals, your rank and all of your service stripes on your jacket. So if you want to question somebody, don't question the safety person with a vest and a bullhorn. Question me. Come talk to me and then tell me I'm not a patriot because I believe in all of these people. So, and then I met Brian, and then I was in for it right away because Brian I felt had different political beliefs but the same values, which I think was really important. On the other side, outside of this is very outside of my work with protest and speaking up against the government and what they're doing, but somewhat related, is I run a nonprofit called Mass Afghan Alliance. After the collapse of Afghanistan, myself and a group of other veterans and diplomats got together here in the United States, helping Afghans during that massive, confusing collapse get through the airport into the United States. But then when they were arriving, they weren't really connected to the community. They didn't all have the same amount of resources. So over a few years, I ended up forming with my board the nonprofit Mass Afghan Alliance, which has helped Afghans, hundreds of them, come to Massachusetts. And so how this comes full circle, though, is these same Afghans that were first terrorized by the British, and then the Russians, and then the Taliban, several of which are our fault too. Some of these things, they came to the United States to be safe, to go to school, to finally have some freedom after 20 something years of working with Americans and earning their trust. and we brought them here, and now I get questions about ICE. What are they going to do? Are they going to send us to Africa? Are they going to send us back to the Taliban? And so the ultimate betrayal for me has been the American government's turning their back on Afghans. Most Americans on that side of the aisle of the discussion don't even remember who we went to war with, because we didn't go to war with Afghans. We went to war with Al Qaeda and the Taliban to set up a free government for them, and we failed. And they have no sense of duty to them, no sense of honor. But those are my two things. I do a lot of protest work. I speak out for a lot of people. If you have a cool project, I will put my effort into helping you along. But that's my work.
Great, John. Yeah, the mass Afghan stuff, I think John undersold it. We're talking entire families migrated from Afghanistan, and this was actually a failure under the Biden administration. And these were people that we owed a great debt of gratitude because they had helped us during the conflict. So, props to John for that. He has infinite respect for me for that work. So Logan, you work with, just to remind everybody else, you work with 5051 National. You do the socials up there. You're also a member of MAFO, as we like to call it affectionately, because it rhymes with FAFO. And so tell us a little bit about your activism, why you kind of chose the place where you landed, and how you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, my kind of pathway started fairly soon after I got out. I'm old. I got out like right before Occupy. And so when Occupy hit, I was in San Diego with a lot of other pissed off, disgruntled veterans that had just got back and got out. A lot of us had just come back from a deployment on top of it, and we weren't fucking happy, man. And so got involved in Occupy. That's also when I became a member of DSA. So Democratic Socialist of America. It's only recently become a common thing in American speech now, which is cool to see. But yeah, from there I kind of continued off and on. So during the BLM risings, got involved there, and then worked for Bernie in 2016 for Veterans for Bernie at the national level. And then Trump won, very vocal and active against Trump. But it wasn't until Trump 2 that it was really like, okay, now, with Project 2025, now this guy's already done this. He knows what he can get away with, which is a lot. The guy pretty much, you got to remember January 6th. He said, I don't agree with the vote. I'm going to send people there to the Capitol to overthrow a vote. I couldn't sit back idly and watch that happen. Right. And so for me, I got involved with, 5051 National, Mass 5051, worked with multiple orgs, a lot of respect for VFP. I've worked with VFP on multiple fronts. I know that you have friends over there. I've some of those going back to the Occupy days, actually. Pretty much anyone that is in this thing to fight for basic human rights, basic dignity, to make sure that working class people can afford to live in this country and have good lives, and to make sure anyone that's facing oppression knows that there are people out here fighting, and more so there are people out here that want a world where that doesn't fucking happen. Right. And so that's why I got involved. And like you said, help out with the socials, help out with some of the press stuff, some of the direct action things, going to Delaney. I was at Delaney not too long ago. All the fun stuff, man. If something's going on and I think that we can help out, a lot of mutual aid, that's another big one. And I think we can help out communities at risk. I'm going to be there, man. I'm going to do what I can to try to help out, So yeah.
All right. Excellent. So I'll just talk about myself a little bit because I've been trying to MC, but I am, on the panel and I'm trying to talk about what we're doing here. So for me and my part in all this, I joined Mass 5051 right after the election. I imagined myself, so I was just standing there in like, a dark January, windows open. I'm vaping out the window. The cold is in my face. I'm getting 4 hours of sleep a night because I'm like, we just elected a fascist. What the hell are we going to do? and I'm worried about my family. We're thinking we need to get go bags, and I'm not a person who's usually perturbed, and I was perturbed, and I was perturbed by how quickly people kind of normalized it and got used to the crazy. Um, so I finally showed up and started protesting. I am not, I'm potentially the only non-lefty on this panel. I consider myself right of center, so I'm kind of in like the Kinzinger lane politically. But I felt it's important, like I've read everything Churchill ever wrote, and he talks about this stuff and what happens to countries when they turn authoritarian. And I just had to do something. And it turned out that we captured an emotional moment and we built a pretty big machine. It's a complicated machine. It's hard to manage at times, but we built a really big machine as a result of that effort collectively across the country. And it's the proudest work I've ever done is participating in that machinery. Um, so I am also a member of Vets 5051. And so we are a national veterans group made up of 5051 veterans, sort of like a clearinghouse where we all just kind of talk out issues and try to coordinate issues. And we're also working with Veterans Against Fascism within that group, which is a container, which is meant to gather all the veterans into kind of one anti-fascist banner, so that people can retain their kind of group identity, but be masked. And we exercised this muscle on the 4th of July, and 500 veterans, 600 veterans from around the country showed up in Philadelphia for the 4th of July and marched for 3 hours in the 100-degree heat to make a point. And that event, I think, will have ripples throughout the movement because all of the relationships that were built there and all the opportunities for collaboration and expanding the movement. So Noah, talk a little bit about your experience with Mass 5051 and also your experience, because I know that you were an activist before MAFO was founded. And I know you also have a lot of interesting experience, and also your work in MAFO is particularly interesting. And we should probably talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so in real life, I do mental health work, which is in a lot of ways an attempt to, I believe that US service members have a debt to the rest of humanity. I believe that inherently the work we do is violent. So undoing some of that violence, there's a construct called moral injury, the antidote to which is moral repair. So I actually primarily do suicide prevention work in a volunteer capacity. What that looks like ranges from running, a 15, 16 mile overnight course for people who are not runners to safely be able to kind of walk and honor people, either themselves if they're struggling with mental health stuff, or those that they've lost, people who can't walk with us. And it wasn't until Trump #2 that I think I started putting myself in what we could consider real harm's way. And even that was still done within this mental health context. I asked my boss, hey, when's the next time you're going to background check me? Because my PTO is to go down with prior to the Veterans Against Fascism container. But I'm supposed to go down with About Face to DC. I think I'm probably going to get arrested. I just need to know if I have a job or not on the other side. My boss was cool with it. She said she approved. And then I did, in fact, go to DC and get arrested. So that was, well, not this past June, but the June before. Prior to that, my organizing with both Veterans for Peace, there's a Western Mass chapter, 413, and About Face, which at this time has a Boston crew, but at the time had a little less structure. But all of that was as behind the scenes as it could be, as nonpartisan as I could make it. And definitely nothing that I'd ever want to put on my resume or even really talk to anyone else about. Being very active and activated and choosing to wear the veterans hat very intentionally, and choosing to come to, I was very intentional in aligning with 5051. There are not a lot of civilian organizations that I particularly trusted in the same way that there aren't a lot of veteran orgs that I trust, but I will do most of my deep organizing with these two institutions, which are both under that container now of Veterans Against Fascism, which is half of my wardrobe at this point. So my work within those spaces when we're not doing big events is community care. It's making sure we know that 22 a day is a minimum number of the veterans we are losing. We know that that does not count active duty, that does not count reservists, that does not count the Guard, and it doesn't count allied forces that we've worked with. So really doing everything that I can to protect the sanctity of life is where my organizational onus comes from. being like, oh crap, I gotta be like, oh, I'm an American, and put on again the veteran hat very literally was a decision of the last year and a half. I would say very necessity based.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, thank you for sharing all that, and appreciate having you in the fight. Um, so now what we're going to do is I'm looking at the list here. We know most of these folks. I don't see any particular reason to maintain all the formality we've had thus far. And so I want to open it up and just start talking about these issues. First, I haven't met Christina yet. Christina, tell us a little bit about yourself. I saw your story in the chat. I wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, I didn't find out until after the military that I was raised in a PTSD household. I was like, wait, what? No, it was fun. But yeah, my dad lost his legs in Vietnam, and I just got bored at the age of 28 and was like, you know what? I don't really like my relationship. I don't really like my job. I'm just going to join the army. And it was like on a whim. And my dad was like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, and I didn't know that he was sexist. And he did not want me to do it. He said, women do not belong in the army. And I was like, I'm out. And so I joined and I worked for JAG, did 4 years. I have TDIU right now, but I'm giving it up because I'm trying to get back in the workforce because I have severe ADHD. So I get bored very easily. I can't be on TDIU and just sit around. So
that's common in the activist space, by the way, like ADHD, like the neuroatypical types for some reason were attracted to lost causes. I don't know why, but were you an officer?
No, I was not. My dad was also irritated about that because I already had a college degree. So
and they didn't take it?
No, I told them I wanted to get the respect first and go enlisted.
Oh,
so
okay, all right.
And I would have made it a whole career, but got into this whole big thing where I was married to another military person, and they wanted to deploy us both. And I had just had a baby, and they told me to put my baby in foster care. It was horrible, and I was like, you know what, I'm done. So
all right. Interesting. Okay. At this point, I just want to open the floor. If anybody has any questions for all the panelists or anything, feel free. There's not enough of us. I don't think we need to raise our hands, but we might if things get loud and rambunctious. But you got 4 stellar and stunningly attractive individuals here who would like to talk to you about service. So. Oh, y'all gonna leave me hanging.
Well,
okay, go ahead, Raven.
Well, I can always ask Noah about his experience in Minneapolis, but only if you're ready to talk about it.
So there's part of getting to container this within the Veterans Against Fascism thing, actually. So part of the impetus as veterans that we feel, especially as these organizations can do what we call strategic nonviolence that's a part of the requirement of how we organize. People as individuals, if your morals call you to it, can also be nonviolent. So that's where my nonviolence sits. It lives with me. It's not a thing I do as a strategy, although it is an effective strategy. So Veterans Against Fascism, very, very soft launched at Armistice Day, which we, for some reason, insist on calling Veterans Day. It's actually about peace. And our kind of internal thinking was, well, we can either help people kind of bolster themselves in their communities and do what we think of as mutual aid and direct action at home, or we can try to be organized enough to get ourselves to other places. Before that could happen, so I was signed up to quote unquote deploy, mobilize to the Twin Cities with About Face. Veterans for Peace has a post 9/11 caucus that had the same exact idea at nearly the same time. So initially I just came out to the Twin Cities for a week to provide community support in the middle of, it was less than a month into Operation Metro Surge. I was there directly after, within a week of Renee Good being murdered, and was there throughout the time period during which Alex Preddy was murdered. And then my last day there, because we were doing a lot of not, I wouldn't call it tactical. We were just available, but the attempt was to be strategically available for things like protective presence, right? Simply being present. To other panelists' point, wearing a uniform can make you seem like a very good person or a very bad person. So being very clearly identified as Veterans for Peace was part of the point of being there. But ultimately, if someone gets pepper sprayed, being able to decon, evacuate them, that sort of thing, and also being there as veterans who are standing up against what is clearly one, the worst dressed version of all of our uniforms ever mixed together, and two, just an evil fascist force, felt very important because of the location. I was at the Whipple building quite frequently because of the tendency of allied forces. So it's not just ICE or CBP, it is your local police as well, even if they're not in a formal agreement. But the kind of constant street battles that were emerging within the context of Operation Metro Surge, you were either there when one of those happened or you weren't. There wasn't a lot of intentionality. You just were present or not. So was present in the context of officers already being very riled up, a crowd that was trying to maintain itself and remain de-escalated. And I was arrested, ultimately just kind of aggressively taken down by local cops, by sheriffs, for something that essentially equivocates to like obstructing their ability to do an arrest really good. However, that person, also a veteran, combat veteran, their charges were dropped. Everyone else that got arrested that day had charges dropped. I was, it seems, because I'm from out of town, and also to prove a point, held overnight. It was going to initially be a 72-hour hold, and it was frankly the activism of individuals specifically within Mass 5051, certainly also on the ground, certainly also in the veteran orgs. Veteran orgs bailed me out and physically stayed there until I was out. But I turned into a bit of a local story for a moment there because I got bonked by the state.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little more than local. We kind of had a little national because there was people, we had the pictures out everywhere and everybody was spamming it. We had like this war room set up to like figure out how to get Noah home, and it was a whole like team effort to like unfuck that situation. So
yeah, that's what I think I told some news outlet, obviously very concussed, to something to the effect of like, this is clearly where the battle for America's soul is being had. And I do regret ending the sentence on a preposition, but I don't think that that was an illegitimate thing. I think it was an incredible stress test of my system when I hope to never have to do so.
yeah, well, I'm glad you recovered and cognizant. So, I mean, concussion is no joke. You can't screw with those. So Tim, I was going to call on Tim, but he popped out and he popped back in and he's back. So for those of you who don't know, Tim is the media person over at Veterans 5051, which is an allied organization. He happens to live in Massachusetts. He's a good friend of mine. So Tim, just tell us a little bit about what you do, just so everyone here can meet you.
So I started with actually with a group called American Opposition on March 14th of last year. Went to see their founder, Carlos Alvarez Araños, who is a real firebrand when it comes to speaking. I think Noah probably knows him. I know John and Brian are aware of him as well. And through them, I met I had come up with an idea to do a Veterans March on DC on D-Day, because I thought about, what did we do in World War II? And, why were we storming the beaches at Normandy? And it was to end fascism in Europe. And I thought that symbolically, that was a great day to really make the veterans' presence felt. And so I started working with 5051 veterans on the local outreach. The Union Veterans Council of the AFL-CIO did the National Mall event but what I organized was 200 plus events across the country on D-Day to fight fascism. We called it Unite for Veterans, Unite for America. It wasn't really what I was going for as far as the messaging, but you have to collaborate with with groups that are going to help you, and so we went with that. And we were surprised because in about 3 weeks' time, we were able to get 200 organizations across the country to join in our effort. And if you think back to June of last year, that was very early on in the Trump administration. There were not as many people who had been affected or I should say impacted or angered by the Trump administration. And it's a lot different today. Through that, one of the groups I worked with was 5051 Veterans, and they helped me with that. And eventually I became their Substack editor. My background, I'm a Cold Warrior, 1979, 1988, enlisted, used to work for Stars and Stripes in Europe. Was stationed in Korea, 2nd Infantry Division. When I was in Europe, I was I was responsible for covering the troops in the Fulda Gap, 3rd Infantry Division and 11th Armored Cav. And so, I'm trying to put my energies into really behind the scenes support. And so I edit the Substack now for 5051 Veterans. We were not able to redo D-Day this year in DC because they had the state fairs there, the American State Fair or whatever that thing was called. And so nobody was allowed to use the National Mall in the month before the 4th of July. And so we couldn't even get a permit to do it. My role now, Substack editor, I'm always looking, I'm just going to do a little plug here. I'm always looking for people who are interested in writing for the 5051 Veterans Substack. In a minute, I'll type in the email address for it. I'm sorry, the URL for it. And, I've been to several marches. Brian, I took a mass 5051 contingent down to DC with me once, just so they could network and meet people like Carlos and the people from Flair and other organizations. And so I really work more on the national level. When Brian calls and needs some help with something, I try to help as much as I can, but I'm really focused on the national level.
Yeah, so a little interesting story about this. So we did Massachusetts 5051 did our I want to say it was like our 5th event, and it was the D-Day event. We sort of like basically decided to fall in line with that particular set of messaging through my relationship with Tim. And we did that event, and we called it No Kings on D-Day, and it was 1 week before the actual first No Kings protest. So because I believe in flexing in activism, because you have to flex, you have to be able to kind of celebrate your victories. I like to claim to people that I started No Kings. That is not true, but I was a little early to the party. So,
and the one thing I would say, and I know Veterans Against Fascism, talked about their Philly gathering of veterans. Until D-Day, before Veterans Against Fascism, until that D-Day protest, that was the largest gathering of veterans across the country at the time, since 1932 when they had the Bonus Army. So we had Bonus Army messaging and stuff that we were coming to DC to say we're not going to. We were fighting against the veteran cuts, which, as you see right now with tinnitus and sleep apnea, they're still trying to gut some of those programs. And they're trying to privatize so much of the VA, and they've cut so much of the staff. It's disgusting. And the interesting thing, so I'm a Cold War veteran. I didn't serve 20. I'm not eligible for any of those benefits, but I have a lot of people I served with who are and who count on those benefits. And so to me, it's very personal. You do not leave a buddy behind. And so that's what's really angered me about TCAVA and other things they're doing. with the VA, and so I hope you will check out things like Veterans Against Fascism and other groups, and and 5051 Veterans is very vocal about this, that we should not be paying for veterans benefits at the expense of other veterans, which is what they're doing.
Here, here. And so I want to just give everybody a chance. Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to in activism, what you do, how we met, whatever you want to talk about. Tom may not have been ready to be called, so.
I wasn't. Well, we met at related to the D-Day thing that
Yep.
Tim was just talking about. And
Yep.
by the way, Tim and I met. Tim, you might not remember this, but we were at Representative McGovern's office. So I met you and your wife and some of the other activists that met at his office. And yeah, you're an impressive guy. So it was good to be there with you.
Yeah, Tom, I will say Jim McGovern is one of the most vocal people in Congress, and we
Yeah.
need 435 Jim McGoverns.
Yes, he stepped up. He stepped up, no question. So, my background's a little different. I mean, I'm a United States Navy veteran, submarine service, and I joined the Navy in 1972. So this was still when the Vietnam War was starting to wind down. Military wasn't that well respected at the time. In fact, I had protested the Vietnam War before I joined the Navy. So my circumstance was I was really trying to escape a bad situation, family and no prospects, and that was my way out. So, and it did become my way out. I found myself with a nice technical career after I got out, and I continued activism. My wife and I actually went to protests against the Iraq War in D.C. In the George W. Bush administration, and you could actually see us barely on there's a Wikipedia page on that protest, and we're carrying our impeach banner, which I've since lost, unfortunately.
Oh man, we gotta find that picture.
Yeah. I'll send it to you. I think I can dig it up. So that was it. I mean, I've always, it took me. I wasn't immediately, into the patriotic thing when I first joined and all that. That really wasn't my interest. It was just, I loved the sea. I loved being at sea. I loved the technology of a submarine, and that just all fascinated me. And I jumped into that. But as I matured, and must say I was pretty immature when I joined the Navy, but as I matured and had a family and all, I had a much stronger appreciation for democratic ideals, and especially from traveling around the country, around the world. I mean, I've been to all 7 continents. I've been to probably 40 countries or so, and what we have in common with the average person is just about everything. Our differences are imposed on us by leaders who have some specific agenda for themselves. So it's something I try to keep in mind, is that, for the most part, we're all the same. It doesn't matter what continent you're on. And I just felt a need to counter what I was seeing. I mean, I started seeing this stuff developing probably back in '95, because I was running a startup at the time, and I was very focused on my business. So I didn't spend a lot of time, but I could see little things, like coming out of the 80s into the 90s, that something wasn't right. And, it's gotten worse from there. And now we're in kind of full totalitarian mode here. And it's just something that I'm willing to fight. It's not the right thing. It's not good for anybody on everything, on a lot of levels. I could go on about the consequences of unregulated capitalism, by the way. That one, and the thing that it causes is this wealth income disparity, and that's the root of a lot of the problem we have now. We produce a lot of things, we produce a lot of wealth, but it's not shared among the people who produce it. So that's I think I'm trying. What motivates me is trying to save real democracy, promote real democracy, and establish a foundation, an economic foundation, so that people can thrive. And conceptually, it's simple, but well, we all know here, right? It's a tough slog, but that's why I'm here.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, Tom. Yeah, and it's been a pleasure working with you on the trouble we've caused together. So we had a late show. Carl is on. Let's see if Carl is set up to talk. Nah, okay, fair enough. Okay, and because I want to be fair and inclusive, we're going to allow the non-vets to just introduce themselves. I think it's important in movement building, and the reason we're doing these introductions is I think it's important in movement building that people who come from different organizations in different places all can talk to each other. They know who each other are, because then they're able to reach out. When you have to solve a problem, you can make some friends, you build a coalition to go do an event, whatever. Like, it's really, really important that you spend the time to do the groundwork to make friends across the movement as a whole. So I'd like to talk to Pam a little bit. Pam, you there? She might not be. That's okay. All right. And then John Downey, why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd?
There we go.
All right.
Have to get the mutes and unmutes lined up here. Hi, everybody. I'm John. I'm the onboarding lead with Mass 5051. I have not had the pleasure of serving as some of you have, but one of my children is. And I'm happy to announce that his fiance, Sergeant Emma Crawford, has just arrived at her home, having spent the last few months in the middle of the conflict with Iran. So sometimes good things happen.
Definitely, John. So John has been with me in this thing since the very beginning. He is awesome. He is a crazy hard worker. He's also a sanitation worker. So he basically does things with sewers, and then he does politics, which is doing things in sewers. So it's like he is ruthless and he cannot be defeated. All right. And then we have Pam. Before we talk about Pam, I would like Pam to show off one of her buttons because she's got it.
Hey, here we go.
Yes.
There
All
we go.
right. Yep. So if you've ever seen that button, these buttons have been on like the Colbert Report, because she'll give them to somebody and then that person will be called on. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Cats on a Couch had one of those, and a couple other people. Like, so like that button has gotten around. I've seen them in other states. Like those buttons get around. All right, Pam.
I've seen them in Europe.
Yeah. So that's all Pam.
Okay,
All right,
well, I know they people I gave them to participated in No Kings protests in Toronto and Paris.
Yeah. Yeah, it does not surprise me.
Yeah, so I'm up to something like 6,300.
Yeah, they get around. All right, Pam. So tell us about yourself, and thanks for coming.
Oh, well, thank you. I grew up during Vietnam and knew about the My Lai massacre and also about the Sabra and Shatila massacres, and had a very dim view of soldiers and the general war machine. And was talking to Brian and learning about the oath to the Constitution that gave me a more rounded view. So that's why I'm here. And I'm always delighted to give a button to a veteran because a lot of them really appreciate it. You folks are able to be visible when you wear your hat or something else that indicates you're a veteran. And that carries a lot of power because to other people, that gives you a special kind of authority. And with the buttons, I'm just trying to encourage people to share human stories and to be visible every day. Because if we talk among ourselves all the time, that doesn't help. We might be further enriched, better trained, but we always have to reach outward and bring that information in and always move information out. So that's me. I'm the button lady.
Yeah. So I also remember first meeting Pam, and that was when I was a little uncomfortable with the movement, just because of my personal politics. I'm I'm an avid capitalist. I actually unironically love capitalism. Like, it's not as a joke. I actually just like it as a principle of organization of human labor. And I'm going to a protest and I'm hanging out with people who are kind of like hippies and not really my crowd. And so we had this conversation about a whole bunch of things. And so I came away from that a more well-rounded person as well.
We'll make a hippie of you yet.
I proudly march with the hippies. So. All right. So we had a relatively small panel. We had a relatively small kind of list of things that we had to do. Other than that, we're just here to make relationships. I'm not going to close the door or anything, but at this point, all the formal stuff is done. Everybody's been introduced, and we can just have at it, or we can call it. It's up to y'all. So intent of really there's really two reasons that we're doing this. The first is to help build community, and so that means making relationships and building friends. And the other is to clip funny or heartfelt or interesting stories that we can use for social media to kind of help get the word out about what we're doing. Like, we want to be able to humanize the movement a little bit because, they're calling us communists. They're doing all this shit that is just like out of Joe McCarthy's America, and that isn't the place we want to be. And so we got to counter program that stuff. And this is actually a small way to do that. So thank you all for coming. Your attendance was much appreciated. And Raven, thank you so much for putting this together and organizing it. It was fantastic, and thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to say, as the last speaker of the night here, so this whole series of panel discussions was my idea. I thought, hey, that's something we can do. We can tell the world who we are. And the veterans is our third panel discussion. We'll be having more in the future. I wanted to say thank you to our veterans. I met my first veteran activists during the Occupy movement some years back. And some of those people are still friends with me today. Those are West Coast activists and veterans, because that's where I'm originally from. I've been here in Massachusetts for 4 years, and activism is one of those things that brings people together. And I love it. And I love all of you for your service and for being on our panel tonight. I want to give an extra shout out to Pam. She was on our first panel discussion, and there is so much that we can share with each other. And so I'm really grateful to meet some of you and to be able to tell the world about you. And so thank you for tonight. And I think with that, Luke, you can probably stop the recording.